Hello. Today the question is, will China or might China become the next global superpower? Nobody knows. For sure, I don't know. I don't have any clue about that. But let's try to list down three pillars why China might not be the next superpower. First, aging population. It looks incredible for a place which enforced one China, come on, one child rule for decades. But it's true. It's just a matter of looking at the numbers. So let's take US in comparison to China. US, and now I have to read, in 1960, the median age was not even 30 years old. Then it was 38 years old in 2020, and then is projected to be 41 in 2050. So they gained 10 years in more or less 1 century. Okay, now let's have a look at China. China, in 1960, the median age was almost 20 years old. Good. Then in 2020, 37, and in 2050, it's gonna be 51. So in the very same amount of time, China gained 30 years against the US, which saw just an increase of 10 years. And you know what? This is a great problem. This is a huge problem because every population who wants to become a superpower must be young, for a very simple reason. Young people are violent, they tend to stick to some ideology, and they have nothing to lose. On the other side, the elderly tend to be very attached to their Mercedes, to their quality of life. They don't want to destroy everything to build up something new. So, first pillar, aging population. Second, the difference between the coastline and the inland. Now, everybody knows about Hong Kong, Shanghai, and so on. But the problem is that the coastal line is very exposed to the trading, and it takes a lot of advantage out of this. In fact, I think that everybody knows the skyscrapers, the fancy lights, and so on of the coastal line. But then, when you look at the inland, you might discover a very, very, very different China. And the problem is that the coastal line is called post-historic. What the hell does it mean? It means that they really focus on the quality of life. On the other side, at the center of China, they experience a very different life, a more rural one. But when these two, let's say, inner countries are too separate, then a conflict might emerge. This was the case in the past. It might be the case in the future. Just to name one example, Mao Zedong came out of a rural area. Then the Chinese authority have been trying to expose the youngest generation to some sort of military training, nothing really special, but essentially during the first year in the high school and as a freshman, so the first year at college, they have to experience some sort of military training. They wear the uniform, they learn how to fight, shoot, and so on. But of course, it doesn't produce any real result. So the second pillar was about the differences between the coastal line and the inland. Those must be kept under control. Third and last pillar, maybe every single power must be what is technically known as a thalassocracy. Thalassocracy is about controlling the waterways. In other words, having a very strong navy, a military navy. It was the case for the Roman Empire, and then the British Empire, and then the American Empire. So Maybe someone among you might argue, and what about the ships of the Ming dynasty? They were way bigger than for example, Columbus caravels. True, absolutely true. But it's also true that it was Europe conquering America, conquering Europe. Europeans fought enough among each other, conquering Africa and even a piece of Asia. For example, Hong Kong is the result of what is called the Opium Wars. So again, there was a navy, and even today there is quite a remarkable navy. If you just look at the number of the ships, probably China has already surpassed by a considerable amount US. But it's not about how many ships do you have. It's about how can you steer them? Are you able to use them? Do you have any military experience? So building, it's not enough. You need hands-on experience. So what is the real key ingredient to become a thalassocracy? Fear. Fear. That's it. You really have to fear that someone else might come to you. So it's better to strike first instead of just wait and entrench yourself, just hoping that that you're gonna be able to push back. The typical example here is Britain. Britain experienced for decades and decades, centuries, Vikings invasions. So the sea was really being seen as a threat, and those invasions have been so entrenched, so deep into their history that they even changed the grammar. And when the grammar changes, the violence is at its peak. Example. Now, just following the rules, you should say General Secretary as a role. For example, the head of United Nations. But in reality, you say Secretary General. So the two words, are swapped. And this is one of the things, one of the changes that the Viking invasions left back. Then let's take Russia. Not the actual one, but the ones that Peter the Great, the Tsar, tried to build up. He enforced the construction of a city from scratch, St. Petersburg, because he wanted to have a port that could be used for much longer, because the temperature are just freezing low. And he literally imported shipbuilders from Britain, paying them a tremendous amount of money. And the idea was that they could really teach and show the local ship builders how to create a military navy. But he missed the point. The key ingredient, it's fear. It's fear. Just very, very few populations over the centuries, over the millennia, really made this huge change. And I'm not referring to the fact of having, some ships going out in the sea. Okay, it's another thing. Having a navy that is capable of projecting power over other populations, probably at world scale, it's something that just very few has done. As I said, Romans, Britons, and the Americans. We will see for China, but chances are that they will not be able to cope with that. Last but not least, why it's important to have a navy? Easy, because if you control the waterways, you can just close the access to the sea to somebody else. China, for example, currently it's like China patrolling the coastline of California. So US is currently patrolling between Taiwan, the island, and the Chinese coastline. So they are not even able to access their own sea. So to recap everything, aging population, it might come a moment when the coast and the inland fight.